Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the rule and in support of H.J. Res. 373, the Solomon resolution to disapprove the extension of MFN status for China. I do not often agree with my Republican friend from upstate New York, but he's right on this issue, and I'm happy to work with him on it. Mr. Speaker, this is an issue of human rights and foreign policy, and it is important to us for that reason. But it is also an issue dealing with the loss of American jobs and the lowering of our standard of living, and for that reason, it should also be of concern to every member of Congress. Mr. Speaker, multinational corporations and the big business community have launched a huge lobbying effort to preserve MFN status for China, claiming that their investments create American jobs. Unfortunately, they are wrong, very wrong. While it is true that the huge multinationals like Chrysler, AT&T, and Boeing and others can in fact make huge profits by investing in China, it is not true that those investments improve the standard of living of the average American worker. In fact, the opposite is the case. Mr. Speaker, when multinational corporations throw American workers out on the street and move to China, where workers are paid 15 cents an hour, where slave labor exists, where basic democratic rights are ignored, where workers cannot organize free trade unions, that scenario may be good for the profit margins of the large corporations, but it is a disaster for American workers. It is absurd to be talking about most favored nation status for a country which allows for the ruthless exploitation of its workers. American workers cannot and must not be asked to compete against the workers in China, who in many instances are working under subhuman conditions. I know that this is a very radical idea, but maybe, just maybe, we might want to encourage American corporations to reinvest in this country for decent jobs and decent wages for our workers, rather than in China, where they pay workers $2 or $3 for a day's work. We are told by the Commerce Department that the $9 billion a year in exports from the U.S. to China generates 225,000 American jobs. But if this is correct, then what is the effect of the over $30 billion a year in imports from China, over 3 times the level of exports? Strangely enough, the Commerce Department hasn't been able to calculate that figure. And I think the reason is clear. It would show that our massive $24 billion trade deficit with China is costing hundreds of thousands of Americans their jobs. When Chinese students and workers were violently suppressed in Tiananmen Square, Americans and people all over the world were horrified.
Chair recognizes the gentleman. The gentleman is recognized for 30 additional seconds.
Politicians vowed to act swiftly and strongly to pressure China to stop its repression. But although the repression goes on, American corporations have decided to put profits ahead of human rights. In fact, between 1988 and 1992, U.S. corporations increased their investments 4-fold. Mr. Speaker, let us support the Solomon resolution. Let us tell China that they cannot continue their types of policies. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Okay? When they're talking about China, they're just trying to figure out how to get more money in their own pockets. So the cheerleader said exactly what, hey, it's China. Once we get them into the most favored nations, once we get them into the WTO, they're going to turn out to be liberal capitalists. They're going to, they're going to vote.
Liberalize their economy. They're going to democratize. They're going to let us invest in everything.
They're going to be middle class. They're going to be. It's
going to create a rule of law.
It's rule of law. Rule of law. It's going to be nirvana, and they're going to be okay. So we know 17 years later, guess what? They're a totalitarian regime, mercantilist regime.
His Twitter feed today, you know, the president has had enough with China. In a series of tweets, he stated, quote, "We don't need China and frankly would be far better off without them."
Mr. Speaker, this coming Monday in Vermont, a coalition of groups representing organized labor and our working people, our farming community, and our environmental organizations will be coming together to determine the best way that we can stop the fast-track agreement with Mexico that the President is proposing an agreement that will be a disaster for working people, for our farmers, and for the environment in general. Our nation, and this is an untold secret, is becoming a poorer and poorer nation. Our working people in the last 20 years have seen a significant decline in their standard of living because our nation has turned from a manufacturing economy into a service industry economy, which is paying our workers extremely low wages. One of the reasons that our standard of living is declining is that major American corporations like General Motors, General Electric, and many others have thrown hundreds of thousands of American workers out on the street as they run to Mexico and to Asia to hire desperate workers there and pay them starvation wages. We do not need a fast-track agreement. We need a new industrial policy which provides good-paying jobs for our workers. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
It's my great honor to announce that we have successfully completed negotiations on a brand new deal to terminate and replace NAFTA and the NAFTA trade agreements with an incredible new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement called USMCA. It sort of just works, MCA.
Thank you. Mr. Sanders?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Greenspan, nice to see you again. Mr. Greenspan, I have long been concerned that you are way out of touch with the needs of the middle class and working families of our country, that you see your major function in your position as the need to represent the wealthy and large corporations. And I must tell you that your testimony today only confirms all of my suspicions, and I urge you, and I mean this seriously, because you're an honest person. I think you just don't know what's going on in the real world. And I would urge you, come with me to Vermont, meet real people. The country clubs and the cocktail parties are not real America. The millionaires and billionaires are the exception to the rule. You talk about an improving economy while we have lost 3 million private sector jobs in the last 2 years. Long-term unemployment has more than tripled. Unemployment is higher than it has been since 1994. We have a $4 trillion national debt. 1.4 million Americans have lost their health insurance. Millions of seniors can't afford prescription drugs. Middle-class families can't send their kids to college because they don't have the money to do that. Bankruptcy cases have increased by a record-breaking 23%. Business investment is at its lowest level in more than 50 years. CEOs make more than 500 times of what their workers make. The middle class is shrinking. We have the greatest gap between the rich and the poor of any industrialized nation, and this is an economy that is improving. I hate to see what would happen if our economy was sinking. Now, today, you may not have known this. I suspect that you don't, but you have insulted tens of millions of American workers. You have defended over the years, among other things, the abolition of the minimum wage, one of your policies, and giving huge tax breaks to billionaires. But today you reached a new low, I think, by suggesting that manufacturing in America doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where the product is produced. We lost 2 million manufacturing jobs in the last 2 years alone, 10% of our workforce. Walmart has replaced General Motors as the major employer in America, paying people starvation wages rather than living wages, and all of that does not matter to you. Doesn't matter. If it's produced in China, where workers are making 30 cents an hour, or produced in Vermont, where workers can make 20 bucks an hour, it doesn't matter. You have told the American people that you support a trade policy which is selling them out, only working for the CEOs who can take our plants to China, Mexico, and India. You insulted Mr. Castle. Mr. Castle, a few moments ago, a good Republican, told you that we're seeing not only the decline of manufacturing jobs, but white-collar information technology jobs. Forrester Research says that over the next 15 years, 3.3 million U.S. service industry jobs and 136 billion in wages will move offshore to India, Russia, China, and the Philippines. Does any of this matter to you? Do you give one whit of concern to the middle class and working families of this country? That's my question.
Congressman, we have the highest standard of living in the world.
No, we do not. You go to Scandinavia and you will find that people have a much higher standard of living in terms of education, health care, and decent paying jobs. Wrong, Mr. Greenspan.
May I answer your question?
You sure may.
Thank you. For a major industrial country, we have created the most advanced technologies, the highest standard of living for a country of our size. Our economic growth is crucial to us. The incomes, the purchasing power of our employees, our workers, our people are by far more important than what it is we produce. I submit to you that, may I? And what I'm saying to you is, yes, I found a flaw. I don't know how significant or permanent it is, but I've been very distressed by that fact. But if I may I just finish an answer to the question previously?
You found a flaw in reality?
A flaw in the model that I perceived is the critical functioning structure that defines how the world works, so to speak.
In other words, you found that your view of the world, your ideology was not right. It was not working.
Precisely. No, that's precisely the reason I was shocked, because I've been going for 40 years or more with very considerable evidence that it was working exceptionally well.
To support the important amendment brought forth by Congressman Dellums and Congresswoman Waters. Sometimes I think that the people in this institution and in the White House are really losing contact and not knowing what's going on with the American people. In case you don't know, and you haven't seen the latest polls, the American people hold the President of the United States in contempt. They hold this institution in contempt. They hold the Republican Party in contempt. They hold the Democratic Party in contempt. They think that maybe, given all of the crises facing this country, it's about time that there was some bold leadership here and that this institution made some hard choices. And this is what the choice is about. We are spending $270 billion a year on the military, but we don't have a major enemy. I know it hurts your feelings. I know you're upset about it. I know you're hoping and praying that maybe we'll have another war. Maybe somebody will rise up. But it ain't happening. The Soviet Union doesn't exist. The Warsaw Pact is through. Who are you worried about? Iraq? Panama? Who are you worried about? I'll tell you who I'm worried about. I'm worried about the fact that our workers are seeing a decline in their standard of living. They want to see our industry be rebuilt. That's what they want to see. No more B-2 bombers, no more Star Wars. Let's make the quality products we need. Let's invest in American industry. No, I won't yield. The American people want to see our kids educated. They want a Head Start program. They want their kids to be able to go to college. They want to wipe out the fact that 5 million children in this country go to bed hungry. They want child care for their kids. They want decent education. Let's have the guts to give some leadership to this country. The Cold War's over. Let's reinvest in America. Let's support this amendment.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from California.
Okay.
American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.